Hey, what's up YouTube? My name is Jacek Adamczyk from Filmmaker's VFX Guide, and today we're going to learn how to do that 3D map animation. It's quite simple, but I have quite a few tips and tricks for you that you can use for other projects. So without further ado, let's jump in. Okay, so obviously the first thing we need is to have the image of our map. So where do we get this image? Well, most likely from Google Maps, but what's the best way to obtain it? From what I've found, you could do multiple screenshots and then connect them in Photoshop, but there is actually a better way. So you go to google.com/mymaps, then go to create a new map, go wherever you need. Let's do the New York. We're gonna do a trip from Newark up somewhere here. So what you need to do is find your city, get it on your screen in such a way that it fits, click over here, and then print map. Choose the A3 size, image, and the orientation landscape, and click on print. You can cancel that, but what we have is a high resolution image of that map that we zoomed on. So right click on it, save as, and just call it a map image and save it. And then we can import our image. And as you can see, it's a really high resolution image and that's perfect. Okay, let's create a new composition and name it map. And let's drag our map into our composition. As you can see, it's way bigger. So let's shrink it down, hold shift to scale it uniformly. Like I said, maybe let's animate from Newark to, let's say, Empire State Building. Okay, so what's the first thing we need to do? Well, let's draw our path. So to do that, we select the pen tool with a G or select it over here. Notice that my Roto Bezier option is turned off and I'm starting to draw over the highway. Don't mind the shape and the fill for now. We will adjust the shape later. So this will be our path. Let's click on this arrow down, go to Contents, Shape, and this is where we can manipulate whatever we have on this layer. So let's delete the fill, which is that white area. We won't need it. Click on a stroke and let's change color to, let's say, nice orange. Change the stroke width to, in our case, 5 is fine. And then we can click next to dashes to create a dashed lane. It doesn't really matter, it's a personal preference. You can change the dash length over here. You can move the offset if something doesn't look right. Let's make it a little bit wider. Change it to 12, and that looks good. So now we want to adjust the shape of our path in such a way that it aligns with the roads. So what we have to do is select the pen tool and click on the shape. So now we have the handles with which we can manipulate the curve with. As you probably remember, if you press Ctrl and click on one of these handles, you adjust them individually, independent from one another. So let's click Ctrl and step by step adjust the curves for the road. If something doesn't look right, we can obviously always add the point and manipulate it separately. Okay, great. Yeah, that looks fine. As you can see, our dashes didn't really make it to the final destination, so you can either make it a little bit longer or use the offset that I've talked about. That's what it's for. Okay, so that was super easy. So let's start with animating the path. How do we animate the path? Well, it's really simple. You go to the shape layer, click on Add and select Trim Paths. Now we have a new option under Contents called Trim Paths. And then if you take a look, I am animating the end of the path. If I move the start, I'm animating the start. So let's go to the first second and click a stopwatch. We can move this keyframe to, let's say, 3.5 seconds and then bring it to 0. So let's see how it looks. And we have animation of our path. Great. Let's easy ease out, easy ease in to make it a little smoother. Okay, so far so good. So let's add the shadow. Obviously there are a few ways to do that, but I think the simplest one is to use a built-in drop shadow effect. To access it, you click on shape layer, right click, layer styles, and select drop shadow. As you can see, the layer styles effect showed up. Then you can go to drop shadow options and we can control how our drop shadow looks. We can change the angle, we can change the distance. This is all fake animated. This isn't really a distance in 3D space, so keep that in mind. We can change the size, so basically a softness of our shadow, as well as color. And we can change the color a little bit. Why not? Let's get fancy, make it dark blue. Cool. And as you can see, the shadow is also animated along with the path. So one small touch I like to do is to add a Gaussian blur, because if it's way too sharp, it always looks fake. I mean, we're not going for photorealism, obviously, but that jarring sharpness that sometimes occurs is not always a great thing. Let's use the 1.5 pixel blur. And actually we can do it also on the map. So I just copied over that Gaussian blur. But this is just a stylistic choice, you don't have to do it, obviously. Okay, so now the fun part. Let's create a new camera. Right click, new camera. So I'm going to show you later one more advanced option with the camera. But for now, let's pick a one node camera. So we only control the orientation of the camera. As you probably remember, with a two-node camera, we have to control the camera itself, but also a point of interest. So we don't really control where the camera is looking. We do this separately by using a point of interest. The focal length is 24 mm. That's fine. Going to be pretty wide. Okay, so let's now make both these layers 3D. If it became blurry, you probably have a depth of field on. Let's turn it off for now. We'll deal with that later. So let's plan our scene. Let's say the first second, let's reveal keyframes. Up until this point, there will be a track forward with the camera over the airport, and then we want to kind of follow the path with the camera and end up here. So let's do that. We're going to need at least 2 views to make it efficient. So let's say this one will be our active camera view, and this one will be our custom view. So let's rotate our camera a little. Click R after you select the camera and change the rotation. Let's say 60 degrees. I don't know, we'll see, we'll have to adjust that. Over here I have the world axis mode, because I found in this case that local axis mode is a little bit tougher to control where it's going. As you can see, as I'm going closer to the camera, our map is showing up over here. Maybe let's change the angle to 45 or even 35. Yeah, I like this one. So let's set the camera to the proper location. Okay, let's change 25. That's it. So now let's see if this is our... Yeah, I think this is our original frame. So let's go to the frame number 1, click Shift and P, and make keyframes everywhere in case we want to change things up. For now, we can move this a little bit further back. So during the first second, we have a slight zoom in, and then we will follow the path. And as far as how many keyframes on the way, it's really individual. Try to match it up in such a way that it just looks good. There is no set in stone way. So let's go further. Let's change it this way, this time to the front. So you can see we have a camera looking this way over here, and I can easily now change it to follow the path. And we can do a slight track forward or rather down to get the camera closer to our destination. As you can see, the camera really started going a little bit too soon, so we can move this keyframe over here and see how it looks. So this whole thing is a little too quick for my liking, but we can easily fix that. So what you have to do is just go to the shape layer, stretch the end maybe to 5 seconds, and to not adjust all of these keyframes separately, select them all, click Alt, and then we stretch everything. So let's see how it looks right now. Okay, that's a little better. What I want to do is to easy ease out over here and easy ease in. So I don't really like that ending over here. It's a little too sharp for me. So I'm going to delete this keyframe. See how it looks. Okay. So now I'm going to move it a little down over here. This will be always a little back and forth until it looks right for you. Yeah, I actually like this. Let's see how this looks. Okay, cool. Okay, I think we can switch to one view. So let's turn on the depth of field. Open up the aperture way too much to really make sure what's in focus, and change the focus distance so our line is always in focus. Okay, so far so good. Here we can make a keyframe. So let's make a focus distance keyframe over here. Again, we will not have such a shallow depth of field. This is just to make sure that what's in focus is in fact in focus. Make a keyframe over here. And now we want to make sure, or you can leave it out of focus actually. It really depends on you. And you can turn down the aperture so we have a little bit more depth of field. Okay, let's see how it looks right now. Okay, great. You can always make it slower, make it faster. Really depends on your animation. If for some reason we don't have this right now, but if you were seeing black bars, so you don't have to do it, I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. As you can see, we have black bars over here, and that means we are seeing outside of the bounds of the picture. So there is a really easy fix. Just type in reptile and lengthen towards that direction that is sticking out. So let's see, expand left a little bit, and for tiling select unfold, and then it's mirrored but nobody will ever notice, and you just fixed that black part. Obviously do it as little as possible, as this is a little more memory consuming, but we don't need that. So let's get back to 24. So let's do these markers that you've seen at the beginning of the video. Let's create a new composition. Select the ellipse tool, make an ellipse, go to ellipse path, right click, convert to Bezier path. This way we can modify these points. So now that we click on ellipse, let's use the vertex convert tool to make it a sharp point. Select these 2 points, grab them, move them up, hold shift, and this will be our marker. Now let's select this layer again, click once again on the ellipse tool and create a circle. Let's move it to the center. Now click on contents, add, merge paths. And now we can use subtract, but we want to subtract the second from the first. So just move it to the top, and this will subtract the second one from the first. And this way we have a whole. Cool. So let's give it some color. So use for color gradient. Let's get back to our composition and select the same color that is our path. Go to contents, shape, stroke, click on the color. We can copy this color over here and click, paste to each and every one of these 4 gradients. Now we have 4 controls, move them, and then make this one a little lighter, this one a little darker, and you can see we have a cool way to do a gradient. Again, add a Gaussian blur, maybe 3 pixels, and also we want to have a little bit smaller composition. So let's click on region of interest and select only our marker. Now go to composition, crop comp to region of interest. And we can now select our shape layer, select align, to center, and awesome. Let's save it and bring over our comp, which is this. Let's rename it marker and bring it to our composition. Let's make it 3D. Let's scale it down like so. Now choose the anchor point tool, which is pan behind tool, select Y. Now we are moving only the anchor point and we will move it to the very bottom of our layer over here. This is our layer. So now let's use the selection tool and rotate it 90 degrees. Hold shift to move in 45-degree increments. Actually, it doesn't have to be a strict 90-degree angle. Just make sure it looks good on your map. You can move it down or up. It might be going in and out of focus, and that's just because of the depth of field. So either you can make a depth of field larger, as you remember, by closing down the aperture over here, or you can just make this a little bit smaller and voila. Go to the front view. As you can see, we have our marker over here. We can duplicate it. Let's name it marker start, marker end, select the marker end, and we can move it to the end position of our journey. Let's make a small animation. Select S when clicking on that marker. We are in the beginning. Let's change to active camera. Again, adjust it in such a way that it looks good for you. Let's make a keyframe on a scale and let's set it to 0. It can even overshoot a little bit. So we have the final scale is 13.5. So let's change it to 16 and there will be kind of a pop. Cool. Copy these keyframes, go to the end, select the scale and paste these keyframes. You can do it over here. Let's see how it looks. Okay, cool. So a few final touches. It looks a little bit flat for me. So let's select our shape layer, select local axis mode and move it just a tiny bit up. Again, go to layer styles, go to drop shadow and maybe increase the distance just a little bit. And if you'd like, you can add the motion blur, obviously. So let's turn it on and see how our final composition would look like. And you can use it anywhere when you can show your character moving from one place to another, when it's important to the story, when you want to show how to get to, for example, your client's location. I don't know, whatever you need to do to carry on the message you want to carry. Perfectly said, Jacek, good job. I want to show you one more cool thing I sort of came up with, I found, doesn't matter. It's a cool trick that I sometimes want to attach something to the end of this point. So let's turn off the motion blur. It can either be an arrow or it can, for example, be a point of interest of the camera. So let's create a new composition, duplicate it and open it up. Let's delete this camera. We still have our animation. Let's create a new camera and change it to 2-node camera. Guys, I'm going to be honest, operating the 2-node camera is often a pain in the butt. Let's turn off the depth of field. And what I mean by this is if I only move my position, you can see my point of interest is staying where it is. So if I use these gizmos, the point of interest is moving with it. But if I'm using these tools, so orbit around a point, it's often really hard to really nail that composition, that movement, and actually it requires a lot of practice. That's why there are plugins like HANDYCAM plugin and whatnot. But to the point, let's change it to custom view and move this camera just a little bit closer to the center. Let's check the front, and it's going to move like here and like so. So let's move it down. Cool. So now this is our active camera, right? So let's create a new null object. And I'm going to first place it. Let's make it 3D. I'm going to place it exactly over our starting point. So now we will need this null to follow the path exactly. How do we do that? Well, I found an expression, and I found it on motionboutique.com/trim-path-tricks. Let's copy this expression and paste it on the position of our null. So alt click on position and paste it. We will obviously have to adjust it a little bit. So first we create a variable called shape group. So this takes this comp layer, path layer. Maybe let's rename it to path. Let's get back here. Let's change it to path. Let's make it a little bit bigger. It goes to our path layer, content, shape 1. So let's see. Yeah, that's the right name. Then creates my path, which is our shape group, which is this group we created before, and goes even more into the content called path1. Yep. And it takes the path variable. Great. Then we create a trim end. Trim end is the exact point on our path. So to grab that, it gets shape group, content, trim paths 1, and takes the variable called end. And then our final position would be my path dot point on path trim end, which is basically just a percentage of the path converted to a point on that path. If you don't understand, don't worry. Okay, it complains here that method name trim paths 1 in class group doesn't exist. Oh, because when I click the add trim paths, I didn't select the shape, but rather contents. But it's all fine. All we have to do is adjust to it. So we can change the shape group to this comp layer, and it should be good to go. Let's see. Let's copy this and see if it worked. Yeah, it doesn't complain. Great. So, what do we have over here? It's offset. Okay, this is because our current value right here doesn't take into the account our current value. So our position that we set it on previously, right? So all we have to do is have all of this movement as it is, but just use value plus. So instead of replacing, we will be adding. We might need to adjust our current position. So let's move it over here and over here. And it should follow it exactly. Okay, that's awesome. So depending on your shape structure, you might need to modify this a little bit, just like I did. If not, you can use the original. I will link everything in the description under the video. It's all good. It was a good learning opportunity to spot how we can use these expressions that are already on the internet to adjust to our needs. Okay, back to the video. Quickly, go to point of interest and use the pick whip tool and pick whip it to the position. Let's see how it looks right now. And awesome. It follows the path exactly. To not see obviously all of these corners, what we can do is change the focal length. So double click and maybe change it to 50 mil. So let's see how it looks. Awesome. As you can see, we have a little bit of the edge right here, but again, CC Reptile, expand up just a little bit, change it to unfold, and it's fixed. If you have the Gaussian blur, you might want to put it before the Gaussian blur to avoid any silliness over here. So this is one fun way to adjust our camera to look at the point. Again, then you can obviously add the motion blur, add the depth of field and whatnot, but you already know how to do this. So yeah, that's it. I'm out. If you'd like to learn more, I have a webinar. It's called 10 Top Things You Can Do in After Effects as a Filmmaker. Check out the link in the description. Meanwhile, subscribe if you aren't already, and that's it. Hit me up with any questions you might have, and I'll see you in the next one. Oh, and also I wanted to greet my wife because she told me to. See ya.